History possesses a near-ruthless patience. While we rush to categorize the past into neat boxes of heroes and villains, the past waits for us to understand the context of the choices made. Take King Qian Hongchu. He ruled Wu Yue, a kingdom in the coastal Jiangnan region during the 10th century period of the 5 dynasties and 10 kingdoms. His reign ended with a decision that still sparks intense debate. He handed his entire kingdom over to the expanding Song Dynasty voluntarily, without a single sword being drawn. For centuries, traditional scholars have ridiculed this surrender. The standard narrative dismisses him as a ruler who lacked the spine to defend his own borders, prioritizing his own comfort over national independence. But labeling him a coward assumes we are measuring him with the right metric. If we look at the actual outcome for his people, we have to ask if our framework for judging leadership has prioritized the king's ego over the kingdom's survival. We can evaluate a leader's choices using 2 different scales. The first scale is royal glory. On this vertical axis, handing over your crown drops your score to 0. In this framework, fighting a doomed war is the only acceptable path, because it buys a reputation for tragic honor. But the second scale is social continuation. On this horizontal axis, that exact same decision slides to the far right. Here, the priority is the preservation of the civilization's physical and cultural wealth. Effective rule requires the cold discipline to execute a civilizational stop-loss for the general population, even when it means sacrificing the ruler's individual prestige. To see why that stop-loss was necessary, look at the map Qian Hongchu was staring at. The Song Dynasty had already absorbed almost every competing state. Wu Yue was rich, but an isolated remnant on the edge of a unified continent. Could they have fought? Yes. The region is a dense network of rivers and waterways. Invading armies struggle in that terrain, making a prolonged guerrilla resistance a viable tactical option. Yet tactical friction doesn't erase strategic reality. The Song had the resources, the manpower, and the momentum of a newly unified empire. The math did not favor Wu Yue in a long war of attrition. Drawing out a conflict wouldn't have saved the state. It would have turned a thriving economic hub into a wasteland of ash and famine, trading the lives of civilians to buy the king a few lines of praise in military histories. Qian Hongchu treated his royal status as a liquid asset. He traded his own titles and dignity to secure a peaceful transition of power. This peaceful transition enabled what we can call cultural compound interest. Because the physical infrastructure and social fabric were never burned to the ground, the region's economy and intellectual output continued to accumulate for centuries without interruption. This chart visualizes that continuity. It shows how the region's cultural and economic wealth smoothly bypasses the collapse that usually accompanies dynastic shifts. The proof is in the Qian family itself. They survived and flourished, eventually producing a lineage of world-class scientists and scholars a millennium later. The silence of a war avoided holds more value for a civilization than the loud, temporary glory of a military victory. Modern small nations navigate these same narrow straits between emerging powers and established giants. The tension driving these rivalries is the Thucydides trap. This is a structural driver where a rising power threatens to displace a ruling power, pushing their friction toward an uncontrollable breaking point. In this environment, the immediate threat to a smaller nation is rarely a direct, unprovoked invasion. The danger is getting crushed in the gears of proxy conflicts and global supply chain realignments. A small state lacks the mass to alter the overarching balance of global power. Its leaders can only choose which price they are willing to pay to ensure their nation survives the transition. When small states fail today, it is often due to internal miscalculations, driven by emotional nationalism rather than rational geopolitical strategy. The first error is overestimating leverage. When leaders play a weak hand with blind optimism, they risk provoking a disproportionate reaction from a superpower that feels its core interests are threatened. The second error is total bloc dependency. If a state attaches itself completely to a single superpower for protection, it surrenders its strategic autonomy and loses the diplomatic flexibility needed to adapt when alliances shift. In the modern era, a strategy of tragic heroism against overwhelming odds results in national suicide masquerading as patriotism. Avoiding geopolitical sacrifice requires abandoning the romance of blind courage in favor of structural, calculated actions. A state secures its future by hardening its internal institutions, maintaining diplomatic flexibility, and building economic irreplaceability, producing goods or services the world cannot function without. When we look back at King Qian Hongchu, we see someone who intuitively grasped these constraints. Divorced from moral judgment, his surrender reads as a masterclass in structural understanding. He identified the path of least civilizational harm and took it. The study of history offers more than a chance to pass moral judgment on the dead. It provides a toolkit for maintaining rational clarity when the pressure of great power competition reaches a breaking point.